Hello everyone, it's Ian from Collector's Corner in Wirksworth. I've been kindly asked to do something a little bit more long form on my cleaning and pressing process. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to take you through how I press and clean vintage American comics. And I'm specifically talking about comics, in this instance published in the 1960s, but this process would work the same really for comics from the 60s to the kind of mid 80s. Outside of that period, it would be a slightly different process. So feel free to ask me about that if you wish. Anyway, who am I and why would I talk about this? I've run a one-man comic shop for about 7 years, and it's a lifetime thing for me. I'm getting on. I've been a comic book guy my whole life. But professionally, I've done a lot of different things in my life, but I have worked in art handling at a very, very, very high level. So that did give me a little bit of background in getting my eye in on certain things. Anyway, I'm going to just take you briefly through what we need, and then we'll get into it. So I'll show you this. So this is a comic that I did this process on last night. And there's no guarantee that the one we do today will turn out like this, but this is a great example of what you can achieve with this process. So this comic is from 1969, and it's The Mighty Avengers number 66. And you can see that it is possible to really, really bring these comics back to life. Obviously, you can see that how clean and white that is. It's very flat. And that is pretty sweet with a little bit of work. So what you can't do with this process is remove significant damage. So losses, major colour breaking creases, heavy spine ticks, things of that nature. But you can remove bends and mild creases to a comic, and you can also bring the colours and the whiteness back a little bit. It depends on the condition of the comic when you start, but if it's not too bad, like the one we're going to do today, you really can up the quality of the comic. The reason I do it, obviously, is that the comics present a lot nicer in the shop, and it does up the value if you do this right. Anyway, first thing I'd say about this process is when you're working, make sure that your space where you're working is free of coffee and sellotape. Never use real sellotape on bags and boards. Always use low tack tape, because if you remove a comic from a bag and it gets stuck on old school sellotape, you've probably knackered it. So be careful and use low tack tape. The things you will need for this process, the most expensive of which will be a hot press. They're not crazy money, but you know, you can't do this for free. But it's a hot press. You'll need a hot press. You would need some, I use cotton buds, or you can use soft tissue paper, but be very careful, but I'll tell you why. I also use a magic rubber. These can be picked up quite affordably. And I use new bags and boards. I would say the priority with this is make sure you use a fresh bag, and use acid-free backing boards. And the reason for that is that if you use normal cardboard as a backing card, they do what they call off-gassing. So it will, over time, break down and release gases in the bag, which will then eventually damage the comic. So don't do that. Use acid-free backing boards. So the comic that we're going to look at today, carry out this process on, is another copy of the Avengers, and I've chosen something that's not in terrible shape. It's actually pretty decent, but show you just how much you can improve the quality of this on something that's already in pretty decent shape. We're going to look at a shillings price copy of The Mighty Avengers 63, published in 1969. So this is the comic. Now, what you can't really see on this video is that it has got mild soiling to the cover, so it's a little bit kind of dusty, and it does have, it's got a little bit of spine roll, not much, but a little bit, and that's just where the spine is starting to turn around. That's normally because people have stacked them like that, so they tend to turn on the spine. Back is pretty decent. And the front is pretty decent. It does have some fairly mild non-colour breaking bends and creases, so you're not really going to be able to see it very well on this video, but I can definitely, well, I hope I can improve the quality of this comic. So yeah, this is where we start. So first thing you do is check that it is all there. So, you know, is it loose? Is its cover still attached? Is every page complete and clean? Is there anything cut out, missing? Is there anything been written in it? How are the staples? Are they rusty or damaged? So in this instance, the staples are a little rusted, but that's basically the only fault with this comic. It's pretty decent. So that is a good starting place. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to clean this with a cotton bud or a cotton ball. This is quite a tricky part of the process. Be really careful with this. Okay, good advice here. So when I was in art handling, I was always told if you were cleaning something or trying a new process, particularly on a valuable or historic item, always try it in a bit that no one is going to see. So in this instance, if this is the first time you are doing this and you are unsure about how much pressure to put on and all that, start on the back and take it from there. This is a mild process. Do not put too much pressure on. And the reason for that is if you put too much pressure on, if you're like, oh, I'm really going to work this, you will take off the colour. So don't do that. This initial part of the process is just to remove any mild soiling to the comic. And so in this instance, I'll try and get it on screen. I just tend to just do a little bit of that. Just take off that initial surface dirt. So you can see there that that's taken off, and it probably won't show up, but I don't know if you can see that. So that has taken off a slight bit of dirt off the back. So again, I can now see that I'm not taking the colour off with that. The kind of pressure that I've put onto it has not removed any colour. So I'm going to do the same on the front. I'm just going to very gently clean the front of the comic and just remove that initial soiling. So I tend to go clean towards the edges. What I don't do is kind of go like that, because all you're doing then is really sort of smudging the dirt in. So do that. Yeah, definitely getting some dirt off there. Like that. And you can see there that there's quite a bit of dirt to come off the cover there. So that is that part of the process. So that's your initial clean. So what I tend to do with these magic rubbers is I tend to cut a little bit off because there's no point using it all. So I'll take a little bit, and again, very carefully, don't put too much pressure on. You're going to clean really around the white areas. Now you can use this on the rest of the cover, but just be really careful. You're not going to put too much pressure on, because again, you will take the colour off, okay? So we're going to very carefully, and again, you know, you really want to do it a little bit, look at that, you know, if there's colour on it, be really careful. But basically start off on this, you know, the smallest amount of pressure, and don't go nuts. Just be very, very careful. Take your time. This whole process takes me about 20-25 minutes to do in total. And I do tend to find that I can't see it on the take the glasses off. Very carefully working around, looking for areas that I think are soiled. But obviously this, as I say, this particularly works well on the white sections. You will notice they tend to come up a little bit nicer. But when you get onto the coloured sections, just be very, very careful that you're not going to take off any of the colour. Probably showing my increasingly large bald patch while I'm doing this, but there you go. It's the downside of social media when you're getting older. Yeah. Okay. Now, once that's done, we're going to do, after it's been pressed, we're going to do another little clean. And I do find that tends to separate. I don't know if there's a sciencey reason for this, but I do find once it's heated, I'm not sure whether it separates the dirt from the comics. A second clean does tend to make them look really punchy. But this is after its initial dry clean. Yeah, so that's looking pretty good already. So we're now going to put this into the press. So with the press, keep in mind, it's hot, it's dangerous. Be very, very careful, take your time. One thing I didn't mention before is, and I have mentioned this previously, I don't use gloves or anything like that. But what I do is make sure I've got dry and clean hands. And also, once you've cleaned the comic, maybe dry and wash your hands again and dry them, because sometimes you'll find you'll picked up dirt on your fingers or whatever. Right, we're now into the pressing part. So what I've got here are Teflon sheets. Yeah, so you will need Teflon sheets to do this. You can buy it in rolls, it's not crazy money. So the first part of is it's kind of a sandwich process, this. So you've got it initially on there's a large piece of Teflon beneath the comic. You then get two smaller pieces and carefully put one inside the back cover, so between the back cover and the back page. And go to find the center page. Get a backing board, an acid-free backing board, and put that nice and tightly into the center page. Push it up against the spine. So that's going to help it stay really flat. And then another smaller sheet inside the front cover and the front page, like that. Make sure they're sitting nicely. Make sure that they're not indented against the comic, as in like that it fits perfectly, because if you press it and it's offline, you will get a line on the front of the comic, so don't do that. So then you're going to put that on there. You get another large sheet, put that over the top, and then carefully you're going to put the whole thing in the press. So the press isn't hot yet, the press is cold currently, so I'm going to put this in, then we close it off, tighten it up, and then we turn it on, okay? So that is then in there. I'm going to turn, I'm sure how well you can see that, but okay. So with presses, one thing I would say, turn it on, is you can put too much pressure on. So when you tighten it off, it'll initially, so this one, they're not crazy money these, but it will initially press down, then you can tighten it off. And you can tighten it off a little bit, but don't go nuts. Don't go, oh my God, I'm going to tighten it to like beyond Hulk powers. Don't do that, because what will happen is if you put too much pressure on, the micro markings on the Teflon paper will indent the comic. So don't do that. But you want to put pressure on, but not like crazy level. You should be able to just feel it as you do it, that there is a point that you think, if I go beyond this, it's probably damaging it. So don't do that. Once the comic is in the press, whether this is what other people do, I'm not sure, but I press it at 160 degrees for 15 minutes. And I just leave it alone. And that's when I go off and prep the next one or start cleaning the next one so it's ready in time. So while the press is doing its work, what I would recommend is just preparing yourself for when the comic comes out. Again, make sure your space is clear and dry and free of any water or anything else that's potentially damaging. And prepare yourself some tissue paper. And that's because when the comic comes out, not always the case, but most of the time, vintage comics will produce moisture. And that will be around the edge of the comic when you take it out. So you want to make sure you've got a little bit of tissue paper just to mop up that excess water. So the 15 minutes has passed, and the comic has hopefully been pressed in the press. So worth keeping in mind that this machine is made of metal and it is just heated to 160 degrees for 15 minutes. So be careful. Like I said before, take your time. Don't rush this. Allow this to cool a little bit before you take the comic out. And when you do take the comic out, be ready, as I said, to mop up any extra moisture. So let's see what happens. So unloosen the press. And then basically when you take it out, what I do is I try and keep it flat and just put it straight here, okay? Like that. And then just be careful again not to catch yourself on the press because it is still hot. So again, you might want to let the comic sit here for a few minutes just to make sure it's cooled and not to harm yourself. But this one has cooled, so I'm going to take this off. I'm going to put that down there. Now, I don't know if you can see it, but around the edge of the comic, water droplets have arrived. So just keep in mind, what you don't want to do is get the comic wet. So, using your bit of prepared tissue paper, just very carefully mop that excess moisture up before moving the comic. Just be very aware of your space around you, and particularly when you move this. I'm going to put that over there. And before you just put the comic back down again, just make sure there's no excess water has gone on your surface. So I do that. Put that there. And then very carefully take out these inner ones. So what I tend to find is some moisture will have gathered here. So again, I just give that a little bit of a dry, mop up any excess moisture there. So those, and then take out the backing board out of the center page. Put those over there. So that's the pressing process. Now what I tend to do is, after I've pressed it, and as I said, I'm not sure if this is like a sciencey or not, but I do tend to find that the heat process does separate a little bit more of the soiling. So a second clean after the heating does tend to bring up the colours and make it look even more punchy than it did before. So in this instance, again, I'm going to just take a cotton bud, and I'm just going to very, very carefully give it a second clean, like that. This is probably really dull, but hopefully it will be worth it. So let's do that again. And on that second clean, so this is a fresh cotton bud, you can see that some more dirt's come off. And then again, with my magic rubber, I'm just going to very carefully give it a little bit more love. and just try and take off any excess dirt. Again, you know, keep your eye on this, because I'm very gently do it, but keep your eye on that, because if suddenly that starts to change colour, like, you know, going red, it's taking the colour off, right? So be very careful with that. Okay, you see a little bit of dirt's come off there. So that, my friends, is pressed and cleaned, and the final part of the process is to put it into fresh bag and board. As I said, I used 2 with Silver Age stuff, and obviously this is before I put any tape on it. Just very carefully drop it into there, and then using my low tack tape, take a bit off, just then smooth it out a bit, make sure there's any excess air taken out of the bag. And this, my friends, is a cleaned, pressed and freshly bagged and boarded Mighty Avengers 63 from 1969. There you go. Thanks so much, everyone. I hope that was interesting. Really appreciate it. See you later. Bye.